"That's the wrong formula," Black Waitress whispered to the billionaire. "And saved his $100 million deal. What if I told you that sometimes the most important words you'll ever hear come from the most unexpected person, at the most crucial moment of your life?" 42-year-old James Mitchell sat in the corner booth of Murphy's Diner, his $3,000 suit looking completely out of place among the worn vinyl seats and chipped coffee cups. His hands shook slightly as he stared at the contract spread across the sticky table. Tomorrow morning, he'd present this formula to investors who could make or break his pharmaceutical company's future. $100 million hung in the balance. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he barely noticed. Numbers swirled in his head like a tornado. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what. His phone buzzed with another urgent message from his board of directors. Time was running out. Then she appeared at his table, coffee pot in hand, and everything changed. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Keisha Johnson had been working the night shift at Murphy's Diner for 3 years, ever since her husband passed and left her with 2 kids to raise alone. At 36, she'd learned to read people quickly. The businessman in booth 7 wasn't just another late-night customer nursing cold coffee. His expensive watch caught the fluorescent light, but his eyes held the same worry she'd seen in her own mirror during those sleepless nights after the funeral. "More coffee, honey?" she asked gently, already reaching for his cup. James looked up, startled. He'd been so lost in the maze of chemical formulas that he'd forgotten where he was. "Oh, yes. Thank you." His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying the world on his shoulders for too long. Keisha poured the fresh coffee, noticing how his hands trembled slightly. She'd seen that before in her late husband when the medical bills kept piling up. "Long night?" she asked, not because she was nosy, but because sometimes people needed someone to care. "You could say that," James managed a weak smile. "I've got a presentation tomorrow that could change everything for my company. But these formulas..." He gestured helplessly at the papers. "I've been staring at them so long, I can't tell if they're right anymore." Keisha glanced at the papers, then stopped. Chemistry equations filled the pages, but one section made her heart skip. During her 3 years working toward her pharmacy degree before life got in the way, she'd studied drug interactions extensively. Her professor's voice echoed in her memory, "Always double-check compound ratios. 1 decimal point can mean the difference between healing and harm." "What kind of medicine?" she asked carefully. James hesitated. He never discussed business with strangers, but something about her genuine concern made him open up. "Heart medication. For people who've had multiple heart attacks. If this works, it could save thousands of lives." Keisha's breath caught. Her husband had died from his 3rd heart attack, despite all the medications that never quite worked together properly. She looked at the formula again, her eyes tracing the molecular structure. That compound ratio in section 3 looked familiar, but wrong. "How many people will be taking this?" she asked quietly. "If approved. Could be hundreds of thousands within the 1st year." Keisha's hands tightened around the coffee pot. She thought of all the families like hers, desperately hoping for medicine that actually worked. She thought of her husband's last doctor's appointment, when the physician explained how drug interactions had limited their treatment options. James noticed her expression change. "Is everything all right?" She looked at this wealthy stranger, then at the formulas that could affect so many lives. The diner's clock ticked loudly in the sudden silence. Outside, a police siren wailed in the distance, reminding her that real people with real problems were counting on decisions made in rooms they'd never see. "Sir," she said slowly, "I need to tell you something important." James set down his coffee cup, something in Keisha's tone making him pay attention in a way he hadn't all evening. "What is it?" Keisha pulled out the small notebook she always carried, a habit from her pharmacy classes. "I studied chemistry for 3 years before." She paused, remembering the phone call about her husband's heart attack that ended her dreams of becoming a pharmacist. "Before life got in the way. This formula here," she pointed to section 3, "the compound ratio is off." "I'm sorry, but I don't understand," James said, though his stomach was already beginning to clench. "I have a team of the best chemists in the country." "I'm sure you do," Keisha said gently, "but sometimes fresh eyes catch things tired ones miss." She pulled out a worn chemistry textbook from her purse, one she'd never been able to bring herself to sell. "This compound, when combined with standard blood pressure medication that most heart patients take, it creates a reaction." James felt the blood drain from his face. "What kind of reaction?" Keisha flipped through pages that showed obvious signs of heavy use, her fingers finding the exact passage she remembered. "It increases the risk of internal bleeding. Not immediately, maybe not for months, but eventually." She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much loss. "My husband was on a similar medication combination. The doctors said it contributed to his complications." The diner suddenly felt too quiet. James stared at the formula he'd reviewed hundreds of times, seeing it through completely different eyes. "But our preliminary tests were probably done on healthy volunteers, right?" Keisha asked quietly. "Not people already on multiple medications." James's hands began to shake again, but this time from fear, not fatigue. She was right. Their test subjects had been carefully screened to avoid any complications. They'd tested the drug in isolation, not in the real world where patients juggled multiple prescriptions just to stay alive. "If you're right," he whispered, "and we go to market with this, thousands of people could be hurt," Keisha finished. "People like my husband, who trust that their medicine will help, not harm them." James pushed back from the table, papers scattering. 3 years of research, hundreds of millions in development costs, the future of his company, the expectations of— "If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places." James sat in stunned silence, staring at the formulas that had consumed 3 years of his life. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere in the kitchen, dishes clinked as the night shift prepared for the morning rush. But all he could hear was the echo of Keisha's words and the ghost of his father's voice. "My father died of a heart attack when I was 15, he said quietly, not looking up from the papers. "I started this company because I promised myself I'd create medicine that actually saves lives." His voice cracked. "Not medicine that ends them." Keisha refilled his coffee without being asked, then sat down across from him. The diner manager might not approve, but some conversations mattered more than following rules. "What was his name?" she asked gently. "Robert. He was a mechanic who worked on cars his whole life. When his heart started failing, the doctors tried everything, but—" James shook his head. "The medicines made him sicker. He used to joke that the cure was worse than the disease." "My husband's name was Marcus," Keisha shared. "He drove a city bus for 20 years. Always said he wanted to take care of people, get them home safe to their families." She smiled sadly. Even at the end, he was more worried about his passengers than himself. James looked at her with new understanding. "That's why you spoke up." "I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet. Marcus always said that when you know something's wrong, you have to find the courage to say something, even if nobody wants to hear it." James pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. 17 missed calls from his board of directors. The presentation was 8 hours. Investors were flying in from 3 different countries. The company's stock price had already risen based on anticipated approval. "If I stop this now," he said, "hundreds of people will lose their jobs. The company I built from nothing will probably go under. My investors will sue me for everything I'm worth. And if you don't stop it?" Keisha asked quietly. James closed his eyes. "People die. Maybe not right away, but eventually. Families like yours, like mine." He opened his eyes and met her gaze. "People who trusted that we'd do the right thing." The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. 3 years of 18-hour days, missed birthdays, sacrificed relationships, all leading to this moment in a diner at midnight with a waitress who saw what his team of experts had missed. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Dr. Harrison, his lead researcher. Board meeting moved to 6 a.m. They want to fast-track the FDA submission. Don't mess this up. What would your husband do? James asked. Keisha smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her all night. He'd say that sometimes the right choice is the hardest choice, but it's the only one you can live with. James took a deep breath and made his decision. Have you ever faced a moment when doing the right thing meant losing everything you'd worked for? Let us know in the comments below. Sometimes courage comes when we least expect it. James picked up his phone with steady hands and dialed Dr. Harrison's number. It rang twice before the groggy voice answered. James? It's past midnight. This better be important. Cancel the board meeting, James said simply. What? Have you lost your mind? The investors are already here. The presentation is in 6 hours. Cancel it, Michael. We're pulling the formula. There was a long pause. You're not serious. 3 years of work, $100 million in development costs, and you want to throw it away because you're having pre-presentation jitters. James looked at Keisha, who was quietly organizing the scattered papers into neat piles. I'm serious. The compound ratio in Section 3 creates dangerous interactions with standard blood pressure medication. We missed it because we never tested it on patients with multiple prescriptions. That's impossible. Our team reviewed every calculation. Sometimes fresh eyes catch what tired ones miss, James said, echoing Keisha's words. I'm not presenting tomorrow. Instead, I'm calling an emergency review of all our research protocols. Dr. Harrison's voice turned ice cold. The board will have your head for this. You're destroying the company over a hunch. Then that's what happens, James replied. I'd rather lose everything than have blood on my hands. He hung up and immediately dialed his assistant. Patricia, I need you to contact all the investors. Tell them tomorrow's presentation is postponed indefinitely due to safety concerns. Yes, I know what time it is. Yes, I'm certain. As he made call after call, canceling meetings, explaining the situation to increasingly angry board members, Keisha quietly brought him fresh coffee and a piece of apple pie he hadn't ordered. On the house, she said when he tried to pay. You're going to need your strength for what comes next. By dawn, the diner had filled with a morning rush, but James and Keisha remained in their corner booth, now working together to document every concern about the formula. Her chemistry textbook lay open between them, her handwritten notes filling the margins of his presentation materials. Your team will figure out how to fix it, Keisha said as she prepared for her shift to end. People like you and your father and my Marcus, we don't give up when something matters. James's phone had finally stopped ringing. His resignation as CEO was probably being drafted as they spoke. The company's stock would crash when news broke. The financial newspapers would have a field day. But for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. I want you to work with us, he said suddenly. I know you never finished pharmacy school, but you understand drug interactions better than most of my research team. We're going to rebuild this formula the right way, and I want you to be part of it. Keisha stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm a diner waitress. You're a chemist who happens to work in a diner, James corrected. There's a difference. Your husband would be proud. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales about second chances and the power of speaking truth. 6 months later, James stood in the same diner, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The past 6 months hadn't been easy. James had lost his position as CEO, though he'd managed to retain enough shares to influence the company's direction. Half his board had resigned in protest, but the remaining members had gradually come to understand that his decision had saved not just lives, but the company's reputation. The FDA had privately commended their voluntary withdrawal, fast-tracking the review process for their improved formula. Dr. Johnson has a nice ring to it, James said, referring to Keisha's upcoming graduation. The pharmacy school was smart to accept your work experience as credit. Keisha laughed. Dr. Keisha Johnson, who learned her most important lesson in a diner at midnight from a desperate billionaire. Former billionaire, James corrected with a grin. Current pharmaceutical researcher who's much happier. Their friendship had surprised everyone, including themselves. Two people from completely different worlds, brought together by a moment of crisis that revealed their shared values. James had used his remaining resources to fund a scholarship program for working parents pursuing medical degrees. Keisha had become the face of their new patient advocacy program, ensuring that real-world considerations were built into every stage of drug development. The first production run should be ready next month, James said. And the best part? We're keeping it affordable. No family should have to choose between medication and groceries. Keisha reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Your father would be proud. My husband, too. Outside the diner window, the morning rush bustled past. Regular people heading to regular jobs, most of them unaware that a life-saving medication would soon be available because a waitress had the courage to speak up and a billionaire had the wisdom to listen. James pulled out a small framed photo of his father working under the hood of an old Buick. I keep this on my desk now, he said, to remember what really matters. Keisha smiled and showed him a picture of Marcus in his bus driver uniform, surrounded by children from his route. Same here. Some things are more important than money or status. As they gathered their papers and prepared to leave, James reflected on how different his life had become. Smaller bank account, smaller office, smaller ego. But somehow, everything felt bigger. His purpose felt bigger. His impact felt bigger. His hope for the future felt bigger. The diner bell chimed as they walked out together, two unlikely friends whose midnight conversation had changed everything. If you enjoyed this story about courage, second chances, and the power of speaking truth, please remember to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of hope and human connection.